tonight we have a real special treat. We're hosting Stephen Ladd, who is an adventurer and memoirist and small boat expert who will recount his adventures captured in his books.
Recording in progress.
That's good to know. His books, 3 years in a 12-foot boat and the 5-year voyage exploring Latin American coasts and rivers. It's a true story of rowing and sailing through 19 countries and 18,000 miles. That's kind of hard to wrap your head around. He was robbed, he was arrested, don't forget shipwrecked, and he finds humor in people and beauty in nature. Both books are available for purchase right over there by the door. Stephen was born in Bremerton. As a child, he often sat reading in a corner, reading history and geography books. After high school, he traveled through Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, inadvertently witnessing the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. And, oh, by the way, passing a traumatic month in a Moroccan prison.
Where?
Morocco. Yeah. He navigated the emotional crisis of his youth alone in foreign cultures. Upon his return, he obtained degrees from Western Washington and Harvard universities. From 76 to 90, he worked as a city planner for various counties and cities. During that time, he kept his wanderlust at bay with wilderness skiing and canoeing. Meanwhile, he designed and built his 12-foot boat called the Squeak. He spent 3 years rowing and sailing her through remote places, then wrote and self-published the book, 3 years in a 12-foot boat. I'll save the rest for him because it's pretty interesting, and I'm sure he'll do a much better job than I will. So, take it away, Steve. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, organizers. For a little bit. Thank you, Enlighten Group, for enlightening my hometown. You know, I'm sure it needs it. We used to, in our darkest moments, call it Bummer Town, because like it was too boring of a town, you know. And I'm sure it could use enlightenment, but there are always. It's a blue collar town, but it's kind of white collar too. And there are sparks of interesting people here, you know. It's not all extreme darkness, but it's good that there's, you know, really the idea of the speaking series is great. And I applaud you for that. And thank you for Donna here for suggesting this to me, because I had not heard of the speaking series before that, and the library and everything. So anyway, my name is Steve Ladd, and I'd like to make this very kind of locationally specific. I am from here, and in fact, this is my wife, Jenny as in Virginia, not Jenny, and my mother-in-law, Lois. Raise your hand. Okay. My older son, George, and my younger son, Boyd. Raise your hand, Boyd. Okay, so I want to tell you where we live. If you are coming across the bridge from West Bremerton, you get to the first intersection, the first light, that's Sheridan, turn left. Then you take the first right, that's Robin. Then you take the second left, that's East 31st, and we're the third house on the right. Local, and that's where I was raised. So I didn't live there my whole adult life, but at a certain point, my family moved in with my mom and dad. And so they're passed, but we live there now. And so I want to start by telling a story that answers a question that inevitably comes up, which is that of motivation for going on trips like this. And so please indulge me while I tell you kind of specifically something that happened. I used to have a thick red sweater. It was made out of wool, and it was almost, you might call it a jacket, because it was very beautiful but heavy, kind of, and kind of smooth and almost stiff. It was so, and then it had big buttons, like the red buttons. And I had a toy gun that was made out of red plastic, and it was like a 6-shooter cowboy revolver style, but just a little gun. You pull the trigger and it goes click, and so you play cowboy and Indians with that gun. And when I was 3 years old, put on my sweater and I got my gun and I went for a walk. And when I got to, so from the house, I walked this direction on Robin. And when I got to Sheridan, I turned left. And I got about half the way up to the highway, and a policeman stopped, pulled up right by me on the curb. And he said, "What you doing, son?" And I said, "Oh, just hunting bears." And I know that I really said that because he gave me a ride home, and he told my mom what I had said. And then that became a family fun thing to talk about. The story is told, and always the last part of the story is, "Oh, just hunting bears, ha 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 ha." So they knew I was adventurous early on, and I certainly had been. And so why is anybody adventurous? Well, when you're young, you're adventurous, right? You're curious and everything. And think about the mentality or the viewpoint of a 3-year-old. The separation between the imagination and real life, you might say, is not yet developed. Your dream world is still kind of closely linked with your waking consciousness. They're not separated yet. And so maybe so we know that adventurous spirit, or the spirit of curiosity, is certainly there in the child and in your dream state, but it may not be, once you split into a separate dream state, being separate from conscious state. I think that I really did think that I was hunting bears, but at the same time, I probably kind of knew I wasn't hunting bears. But at any rate, I went on and just did lots of, I don't need to tell you all the different things I've done, because some of them were in the introductory bio that was read. Anyway, so I guess getting to these voyages and these books, my biggest sport was probably cross-country skiing, and I would go into the Cascades or the Olympics for like 5 days at a time and camp in the snow and go on these trips. And that was my main thing until I got into my 30s, and I decided to build this boat, which the picture is out here. And it was kind of a breaking point in it was like when it was, well, one job was over and I could do another one, and it just seemed like the time, I guess my financial wherewithal allowed me to do it, and I wasn't tied down. And so I decided to build this boat. And there's kind of a funny story about the design of this boat. It was designed, I designed it as a 30-foot boat, but then I broke up with my girlfriend and I didn't need it to be big anymore. So I scaled it down, and then all I literally did was I didn't even change the drawing. I just changed the scale notation on the drawing. And so from 30 feet, it went down to 15 feet. And then when you're designing a boat, you have to calculate whether the water line is correct, whether it floats too high, which is not too good, or whether it floats too low, which is also not good, but for a different reason. And so when I did that calculation with it being 15 feet, it floated too high. But when I changed the scale so that it's 12 feet long, the water line was just right, because now it's so small that my weight as the crew was significant, and it pulled it down into the water. So I'm a significant part of the overall displacement of this 12-foot boat. The boat without me in it is, well, the boat by itself is about 200 pounds. And then for voyaging purposes, you're obviously going to have some equipment and food and water. And it's probably going to get up to 350 pounds, plus me, 150 pounds. That's about 500 pounds total package. And so now it's a 12-foot boat. And I was sort of, I was sort of neutral. I didn't care how big it was. I think it doesn't, bigger would have been okay. That would have been unnecessary. So small, that sounds good too. And so I designed it to accommodate me laying down asleep there, as you can see. I guess I have this pointer here.
Oh, yeah.
So this is rowing, sleeping. During the day, when you're rowing or sailing, this has gear in it. So when you have a place where you can anchor for the night, you put the gear in the cockpit, and then you can lay down. And when you sit up, your head is sticking out of the hatch. And there's a aft compartment that the opening of it here, the hatch is here, and there's a kick-up rudder, meaning that when you get into shallow water, this kicks up. And it's a very shallow draft. It's only about 6 inches, immersing down into the water. And so here's the oars and the sails. It has 2 sails. These are called the sprit booms. So the type of rig is a sprit boom cat yawl. It's got sprit booms instead of regular booms, and it's cat, meaning that it has no foresails. No foresails. There's no shrouds. There's no stays. It's just freestanding mast. And it's a catch because it's got, well, it's a yawl. In a yawl, the small sail in the back is quite small, and it's as far back as you can get. Therefore, it's a yawl rather than catch. And it's got lee boards for not sliding sideways when you're tacking into the wind. Those obviously can be pulled up. And so now I got this boat, and what do you do with a boat like this? I got out some maps, and so here's a picture of the boat. And by the way, it's in my backyard right now because, and I'm working on it. Yeah.
Steve, is that you standing in the boat? Oh. You had a full beard, didn't you?
That's you wearing with a beard. No,
Oh.
I don't remember if I had a beard. It's not a very clean. Why this? My hair is kind of bushy. So here, this is just to show you what I look like standing in the boat. And so I got out some maps, and I thought, why don't I go? So the idea what to do with the boat came after basically having the boat. And I thought, well, I should go to where it's warm. And because it was intuitive to me that with a small boat, you're going to get splashed a lot, and you might as well be where the water's warm and the air is warm. And I might as well take a river to get in that direction. And so, of course, in North America, what we have are the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers. And so I had a friend, my best friend, he had a van, like it's just a van, but maybe a little bit longer than usual. And my boat fit inside his van.
Wow.
We could even, I think, close the rear door, but with the bow of the boat, and the boat was sitting on its side, and the bow of the boat was almost touching the windshield. We put it in the van and drove to place in Montana, but almost at the border, on a stream called the Milk River, and it was about 9 inches deep, and it was just in the middle ranch land. There's the Rocky Mountains are right there. The snow-covered Rockies are still visible. And it's kind of a unique little stream in that it begins in the US, but then it's in Canada for a while, and then it flows back into the US. And it's the northernmost tributary of the Missouri. So of this overall watershed, it's at the northwest corner of the Missouri Mississippi River system. And no, there was no, you couldn't tell where the border was. There was nobody around. And that's Alberta. There was the town of Milk River. I did stop there and read the vision. Yeah. Oh, like a week or two to get through that part of it. And it's part of it was easy to navigate and some of it wasn't. It starts at 4,000 feet and has to go down to 0 feet. So it's got to drop 4,000 feet in that amount of run. And some of that happens kind of in big spurts, and when those are like areas of rapids. And where I hit those areas of rapids, I often had to get out of the boat, but the water is so shallow, it's never much over my knees, So it might be kind of roaring a little bit, but I could just get out of the boat and hold on to the rear of it or tie a rope to it and walk it down kind of carefully through the rapids, or sometimes kind of stand there and let the rope ran out until the boat was in a shallow and in a calm pool. And then I'd go down to it. And then it joins I'm just going to give you kind of a moderate speed as to this, I could give more detail. So I'll respond to questions to a large extent. Otherwise, I'll kind of go kind of fast. But raise your hand if you want to know details about any of the places. It flows into the Missouri here, and then I continued down the Missouri. I started the trip in August, and it was starting into like October. It was getting quite cold, starting to freeze at night, and so in Bismarck, I rented a car, and it was just a passenger car, kind of a semi-compact Buick, and I put the boat on top of the car. I could put it there myself. I had a air mattress. I blew up the air mattress. I put it on top of the car. I didn't want to hurt the car, and then I pushed the boat up there, tied it down, and the boat was about the same size as the car. And I drove to.
Did you take a picture of this?
You just have to take my word on a lot of things.
Were you ever pulled over?
No.
You sound like Arlo Guthrie.
It was back roads, it was not, and it was it was already starting to be wintertime, I guess. But by the time I got to Omaha, I got a little bit of a jump on winter. It wasn't freezing anymore, but it wasn't well warm either. And so now I'm in the Missouri River is much different by the time you get here. It's how to describe this. Once you get to that point, the river is engineered for navigation, which is done by the fact that the Corps of Engineers builds what they call revetments. Well, a revetment is sort of a riprap dike, which all it does is narrow the flow of the river. The revetments kind of diagonal into the river to make it sort of artificially narrower, which means it goes faster. And since it's going faster, it scours its own depth more deeply. And the result of that was pretty good because the average speed is quite high. It's like averaging 3 knots probably. And that helps you get down the river. And there starts to be traffic of tows, large barges and multiple barges being pushed by tugboats. And then it joins the Mississippi here in St. Louis. And then came down to New Orleans, spent about a month there. And I found a ship that would take me along as a crew member with my boat as my personal belongings to be brought aboard. And it was a Norwegian freighter, and I personally talked to, didn't meet him in person, but talked to him on the phone, the owner. The captain didn't want me to come. He was against it. And he thought the whole thing was quite ridiculous. But the owner was a Norwegian guy, and it's a Norwegian flag vessel, and it sounded good to him. So from New Orleans, I became an official crew member. They wrote me into the crew list, and my job title was deck boy or cabin boy.
And they pay you.
I did not get paid. I was 37 years old.
Passage.
I was 37 years old, but I was a deck boy. I was in the boy category, and I had to work. I had to chip paint and move ropes around and stuff. I was on the deck crew, and it took a week to get down to Panama City. Where they were going was Panama. Well, particularly not really Panama City exactly, Cologne. They went here. This is the Gulf of Araba, to drop some stuff off, and then they went back like this to drop more stuff off in Cologne, and that's where I got out. And I went through the Panama Canal, not under my own power. They would not allow that. So, but I found a big trimaran sailboat that we put the boat on the deck of that boat, and then I was a line handler. When you go through the Panama Canal, you have to have 4 line handlers, one on each quarter of the boat, and they needed the line handle, so they were more than happy to bring me along. But I went under my own power again, starting in Panama City, and so now phase 2 of the voyage begins, and the phase 2 corresponds to part 2 of the book. Part 1 is the North American rivers. Part 2 is just this short but most difficult part of the trip. It's only 600 miles from Panama City to Buenaventura, Colombia, but this is the most difficult and dangerous part of the trip. And the reasons for that is that not because of storms particularly. This is in the equator, close to the equator, a little bit north of the equator. It's like not real stormy, but it's extremely wildernessy. This is undeveloped. You may know that the Pan American Highway does not go through. It goes about this far and then stops. And then roads on this side go to maybe here. So this is just the Darien Gap, they call it. And it's extremely high rainfall. It's I once determined its rainfall and compared that to Seattle's, and it was 13.5 times as much rain per year as Seattle, Washington. It was 1,000 inches, or I forget exactly, but it's very, very rainy. So, and also, why is this difficult? Well, the rain is difficult because I don't know, it's just difficult to be in rain all the time. Your gear gets wet, and then another problem was that the tidal range is extreme, averaging 20 feet of fall from high to low, and often the shoreline. Sometimes the shoreline is just abrupt mountains, so obviously that's not a problem to have a high tidal range. But sometimes the shoreline is very gradual, and then it is it makes it difficult to come ashore. There's big surf, really big surf. The Pacific Ocean has big waves all the time. It has nothing to do with the local winds. It's being driven by whatever is happening in the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean. There's a big swell that results in big surf on the beaches. You usually can't go ashore. You need to go into some sort of opening, such as this one here. And then continuing down, there was a capsize that occurred about here. Oh, well, basically what happened was that one night and various nights, there was no way to go ashore, but I needed to sleep. So I just went about 5 miles offshore, and I closed the hatch with me inside. I put down things that would serve as a sea anchor, so I wouldn't drift too much. But during the night, it rained so hard that my cockpit filled up with water, and I had not realized that my cockpit full of water would destabilize the boat. The boat tipped over simply from having this tippy, sloshing water up high, really, and so the boat tipped over, and I spent the night just kind of managing my gear and trying not to lose anything. I kept the boat upside down. I could turn it any upside down or right side up, but it was better to keep it upside down. And then me just kind of on top of it to stay more or less out of the water. And it was a very intense storm. That was a stormy night. There was a lot of lightning and just the rainfall is just so intense. It's rained so hard that on a sandy beach, that the sandy beach puddles, the sandy beach becomes covered with sheets of water because it can't soak into the rain fast. So anyway, in the morning, I figured out a way to rescue myself, which was that turning the boat right side up. I had these, my water I kept in inflatable 5-gallon bags, these clear plastic things, you can still buy them. And I poured out my drinking water, but just one of them. And I blew it up like a balloon and I stuffed it in there. And that gave me enough flotation so that the main hatch opening was above the water line. With me in the, I don't remember if I'm in the water dishing it out or standing in the cockpit, but either way, I could bail the water out. So I got back underway. I lost some of my gear, but I still had my oars. So I rowed to shore and found a village and stayed in a pretty primitive little place for a while. And I had to rebuild it. I had to build a new hatch cover and various things. I got to Buenaventura and then began the third phase of the voyage. There's no communications, no. This is 1990. It's 1990. I didn't have a phone. There's no town. Every now and then it's a town, and there would have a phone, but most of there's no towns, no phones, and no GPSs back then either. Yes, I reap a vision in what towns there are. Like when I got here, there's a town there, and there's a town here, Dorado, and there's a town here, Bahia Savannah, and in those places I would just get rice or lentils, just things they have in the local stores. See, at that point, I was learning Spanish at this time. Yeah, I had traveled in Latin America somewhat, so I had a bit of a start, and I began intensively teaching myself. Yeah, I definitely believe in being able to speak the local language.
Would
And-
you cook on the boat?
Yeah, the cooking was a Svea camp stove, backpacking stove. It's not much bigger than this cup, it's a little cylinder. And so yeah, I could cook. Yeah, the oarlocks, I broke about 5 pairs of oarlocks during the trip. The oarlocks just kept wearing out. There's a lot of rowing. And finally ended up with these oarlocks that were my own design. I had somebody make them for me. They're we don't have to go into oarlock design, I guess, but yeah, they had oarlocks. Okay, some good questions. Any more before going? All right, so from Buenaventura, I got a ride with my boat on top of a Suzuki Samurai pickup truck to Cali, and that person gave me a ride to Cali. She lived there. She had an extra kind of floor to her condominium, and so she installed me on this unused space, and I had a lot to do. I was writing the book in the meantime. I kept journals. Every day I wrote in my journal, but then I had to stop periodically, about once a month on average, or 2 months, but only when I have access to a computer. I did not carry a computer. I didn't have a computer in those days. But I had gotten into the habit already at that time I liked of word processing. So whereas I wrote my journal longhand, to write the installments of the book, I needed a computer. So that's another reason why I was in college for 3 months. And well, they end up being chapters of the book, but more immediately they were long emails to send to everybody to tell them what I was doing. And then began this phase of the voyage. I got a ride from Cali to Bogota, and then a place called Villavicencio. And first there was a ride to Bogota, and I had to pay some money for that. I had a pickup truck, and dropped me off in a kind of a parking lot, I guess you'd say, in Bogota. And then, big city and pretty nasty part of town that I was in. And I said, now how do I get to Villavicencio? And I walk around town and I'm just looking for like trucks or pickup trucks or whatever. And somebody said, and I'm just asking, talking, and somebody says, go to the slaughter yards because they bring cattle and then they go back to get more cattle and they go empty back to get more cattle. So I went to the slaughter yards and then I went to like a cafe where the drivers sit. And I say, anybody going to this area here? And oh yeah, they did. I had a good negotiating position because they were going empty and only just for a few $100s they gave me a ride. And so I got to Villavicencio, which is on the Rio Meta, and this is called the Llanos, Llanos. It's flats, plains. It's similar to the Great Plains of North America. Very hot, hotter than North American Great Plains. And so I had only, I had researched it kind of as well as I could, but that wasn't very well. Surprisingly, in Colombia, there was no map of Venezuela. I went all over the city to find a map of Venezuela, and I couldn't find one. And until finally I found a road map. And that was the one. Similarly to the United States, I only had road maps. I didn't have it. It was totally bad. Something I didn't explain is that nobody goes that route because it's a drug route for drug transport, but it's also because it's drug transport and it's lawless. There's actually pirates that prey upon the drug transporters, and people are murdered quite often back then. Yeah. I was warned just continually, that's a death wish to go that direction. The pirates will kill you. And in fact, once I got to Buenaventura, I hadn't really heard this until I got to Buenaventura. And the previous person to, Westerner, I guess you'd say, to have sailed through there and came into Buenaventura on a sailboat, he was murdered there. Somebody who wanted to buy his outboard motor, and so they came and looked at the motor and didn't buy it, but they came later and killed him and took the motor. Oh. So yeah, it's a dangerous place. And anyway, now I'm on the Rio Meta, and so the inability to research what was going on, what I hadn't anticipated was that the winds are very strongly the wrong way. The trade winds, of course, up here are from the east-northeast, blowing about like this. And I guess not surprisingly, they're the same here. And so I was going straight into the trade winds, and typically 20 miles an hour. And so I'm having to tack back and forth. The river is wide enough to do that, and I have the current in my favor. But when you have strong wind against the current, it makes the waves especially bad, as any sailor would know. And so it's really, really bouncy, bang, 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 and up and down, a lot of spray. So, but I found that at nighttime, the wind died down, totally stopped. And so I got into a habit of traveling only at night. During the day, I would find any place to sleep. Then when the sun went down, I began navigating all night. I would navigate. To illuminate the route ahead, I found a couple of flashlights, not standard flashlight, but kind of extra large flashlight with these big kind of rectangular batteries about this big, and then mounted that flashlight on the bow and ran a wire back to my oar handles. That the rowing station is normally for rowing in this conventional way where you're looking backwards, but when you have to navigate at night, clearly you need to look ahead as well as you can. So I would look facing forward, and I couldn't row as powerfully or as fast. I'm pushing, but I can see. And with this switch, which is activated by one of my thumbs, I would about every 30 seconds or minute turn on the headlight for a little while, just to see if there was the navigation problem there where there were snags. But the river's meandering and there are islands. I'm just sort of feeling my way along. The flashlight's not powerful enough to see my overall situation. I have to just kind of like a blind man going down this river, but it was better than daytime. Until I got to the end of that river. The Meta flows into the Orinoco here. And now it's in Venezuela. And at that point, the wind was in the nighttime as well. So I sailed in the daytime to get out the mouth of the Orinoco. And the mouth of the Orinoco was a different kind of experience. It's the Llanos generally is dry. And there will be trees along the river corridor. That's only because there's a water source for the trees. But generally speaking, it's dry grasslands, I guess, until you get to here, and then it's jungle. And there are many different mouths. And I picked this one here. And an Indian tribe is there. Sometimes the local people are, I had communications with people. I would stop, although I'm traveling at night, I would stop at a town like this one and this one to reprovision, and I would meet people, but didn't meet a lot of people because I was traveling at night. And another reason to travel at night was that this area was controlled by the FARC. You've heard of the FARC, and I don't know to what extent, maybe I would have been kidnapped or something. So that was another reason to travel. And I got through there without any problems of that sort. This is probably on the order of 1,000 miles. Yeah, the current might be 2 knots, 1.5 knots. It's not a real fast river. And then I can probably add 1.5 knots to that. So I might be going 3, but I'm tacking. So really I'm only doing about 1.5. It's really slow. It's not fast. How long did it take to right? Well, about 3 months of steady navigation. Yeah, I stopped a week here and a week there for different reasons, but about 3 months of steady navigation. And I would typically go about 25 miles a day. And a rule of thumb was that I would go until I don't know, sometimes I went the first part of the night, sometimes I went the latter part of the night, but I would try to often stop someplace where there was, or maybe during the course of the day, there would be hills. Sometimes there were hills on one side, and I would climb the hill so as to look and see the layout of the river ahead. Whenever there was high ground, I would stop, walk to the top of the hill and look, because when you're navigating these rivers, there's dead ends. The river meander, it has different channels, and at a certain stage of the river, all those channels will be open. You can go either way around an island, but at other stages of the river's fluctuation, which is seasonal by year, some of those are dead ends. You can go in, but then you have to come back out. And there
You
are
ever see any wild animals?
yeah. The animals in this area that are of interest are howling monkeys. The howling monkeys are very noisy,
Yeah.
very loud and reverberating. I did see some crocodiles, but alligators are much more common than crocodiles. And chinguilla, which also is called capybara, world's biggest rodent, weighs about 250 pounds. They're very common.
Okay.
The question was, on that case, what kind of animals? All right. Pink dolphins, very common. They were following me all the time. So to move right along, got to the mouth of the Orinoco and begun the final phase. This is phase 3. And see, the other phase of the voyage didn't involve very much open sea, but this one did. So coming out the mouth of the Orinoco, I sailed for about a year to go through all these different islands and get back to the United States and Miami, where I found something called auto transport drive-away. Yellow pages, auto transport drive-away means a vehicle that needs to get returned someplace. There's no money exchange. You buy your own gas, you return the vehicle, and I returned myself and my boat that way to Seattle. Plenty of things happened here too, but we got a lot more to cover. Any questions on this part of the trip? Anyway, this is the real ocean going part, rough, open seas. At first, it's into the wind here. That's the most difficult part. And then it's getting more off the wind. Haiti, I was arrested there. Cuba, I was arrested there. In each case for about 3 days. They just didn't know what else to do. It was unusual, concern about security or just oddness. Then that's the end of that. Yes. Okay. The question is, did I have the route imagined ahead of time? More or less, yes. I thought that that some sort of big loop, more or less of this nature. Yes, I was pretty much following it. I did. Yes. I had a lot of times when I had to stop and repair things. Yeah. Never any critical damage, but constant repairs having to be made in adaptation. Yeah. And having to carry some epoxy with me and tools and so forth. Right. My general rule was to follow all protocols and get any papers that might possibly be required. And so it requires great patience. And I never had any great problems, except like I mentioned in Cuba, they detained me for several days while they were wondering what to do with me. And but in the final analysis, it was just a matter of patience. That was 93. Right, any questions on this part? Yes, sir. Yes, the question is, how did I handle cash? And the early 90s are the early years of debit cards. They're starting to be in Latin America. There's starting to be some use of things like that. Not every place, but some places. So I had some kind of a card, but then there were places long periods of time, like months, where there was no way for me to use that. It's very country to country specific. Some countries, because of the regulations and the banking mechanisms there, you can't use your card, or if you do use your card, you get a very disadvantageous rate or whatever. So I remember there were times when I had to just meet somebody that had sort of some connection to the United States. They would go to the United States once a year because they're kind of wealthy people, and they would loan me some money or something like that. I mean, not loan, but exchange. There's a way where I could pay them dollars and they would give me something to use. So it's iffy. So that was the end of that trip. I wrote the book and self-published it, sold 8,000 copies of it. And then I met my wife. I went back into being a city planner, and she worked in one of the city halls with me, and that's where I met her. And we realized that we both are very outdoorsy, and we went on nothing but hiking trips together, and snowshoeing, and mountain biking, and canoeing together. And then one day she said pretty much as follows. She said, "Steve, I'm leaving. You can come with me if you want. I hope you do, but I'm leaving," because she wanted to have adventure in her life, or at least get out of Bonnie Lake. So I quit my job and I left, and we began this new adventure. So it was really began with her. It was her idea more than me. And it began with a little pickup truck, but pretty soon we realized we needed a boat. And so we found this ready-made boat. It's a factory-built boat called the Sea Pearl. It's also very shallow draft. It also has rebords. It also has a pickup rudder. We built this part. It's an open boat, but we built this, and so that makes it a enclosed boat. It also has got two masts. Here in this position, the masts are laid down horizontally, but to sail, you take these things out. They're just little posts, and in the same hole that the post is in, you put one of the masts there, and put one of the masts there, so it has two masts. And so that's the boat, and this picture happened to be in Florida, in everybody's mills. And this is just another picture to show you what the boat looked like. This happened to be in Paraguay. And Jenny's aboard there. You can see the two masts. The way this boat works is that you just grab onto the mast with your hands, and you twist it, rotate it, and that wraps the sail up. And so that's a form of reefing. And so in this case, both of the masts, both the sails are highly reefed. But when they're all the way out, of course, this comes all the way back to here. And this comes all the way back to here. So we found the boat in Florida, and we met somebody that lived in Georgia where we could do this work. There was about a year worth of work to make the adaptations. It wasn't just the cabin top, but it was also intensive modifications to how you store water and stuff. There was these kind of like tanks and bins and stuff we had to make and attach to the sole of the boat so that it serves as ballast as well as a place to put your food and water and tools. And then we began the trip, and whereas in that other trip it was sort of planned where to go, this one was not planned. This was very much step by step deciding what to do. But we launched in a place called Pine Island, and near town there is pretty what's the nearest big town?
Does that say Fort Myers?
Fort Myers, yeah, that does say Fort Myers. So it's close to Fort Myers. And we sailed along the coast of Florida. We went down the Keys, and then we made the big jump. We went across the Straits of Florida to get to Cuba, and that was difficult. Jenny had not had much boating experience, and it was just rough. This boat is a little bigger, has to be because there's two people, but otherwise it's very similar to the other boat. It's a little heavier, of course, so it's a little more stable, but it's not very stable. It's tippy, in fact. But that's good too, because it's a rowboat, the same as our first boat. It's a rowboat, sailboat, kind of minimalistic, very minimalistic, lightweight. The whole boat weighed about 600 pounds, but then with the gear, it's probably 900 pounds. And but we went to Cuba and sailed along the coast there. Made another major crossing across the Yucatan Passage to Mexico, and this is the Yucatan. And follow the coast here. This is a coral reef coastline. There's barriers, coral barrier islands, and atolls of coral, and very beautiful. We did a lot of skin diving. We went out to the outer atolls. That was first part of that trip.
What year is that?
This is 2000. What the question is? What year is that? And the year is 2009. Yeah, 2009.
I'm also going to say, if you've got a lot of questions, you can buy the book.
Yeah, we got married here. Might as well point that out.
2010.
Yeah, we got married there. So that gets us that far. Now, from the point of this was real Dulce, a little river and lake there. We began again, and here's an interesting phase of the voyage. It's difficult here because the trade winds are going that way, and they're going that way. We don't have a motor, and so tack. Sometimes out at islands, and then we get around this big cape here. Gradually, got the wind more on the beam, which is much better, and came on this coastline, coast of Nicaragua, stopping in each river mouth there aren't very many river mouths, so by the time you get to one, you need to stop there. And interesting thing about that part of the world is that each river mouth spoke a different language. They one would be English, oddly enough. Some of them there's certain parts of this part of the world where they speak English because they were English kind of mini colonies, or they say the pirates used to live there. But some of these islands like Rotan, that's English speaking, oddly enough. And some of these little towns here, it's called the Mosquito Coast because the Indians are mosquitoes. Now, mosquito does not, in that case, refer to the insect, but there are plenty of the insects too. Mosquito is the name of the Indian, but here again, kind of confusing. They don't necessarily look like Indians because the escaped slaves intermarried with the Indians. And so they may look more blacks than like Indians, but they're mosquitoes. Anyway, it's a mixture of racial groups coming together and it's not just the mosquitoes, there's also the Garifuna, which is entirely, each one has its own language. So some of these villages, they speak mosquito, or they speak Garifuna, or English, or Spanish, or various Native American languages. And so very interesting and diverse. And then we got to Costa Rica and Panama. And in Panama, we bought a 2 horsepower motor. It's the smallest kind of motor you can get. It's about this, the engine is about this big, and propeller down here. So because we knew we were going to be going against the trade winds here, we mounted it on the stern, and this is all into the trade winds. This took 3 months maybe, and we got to a place called Puerto Cabello in Venezuela, and we got into the river system here. We realized that with this little motor, and this boat was really a nice boat, we could go well in rivers. And so we in Puerto Cabello, we found a transport over just a little 200 or so mile interval to a little stream that flows into another slightly bigger stream, and then that flows into another stream, and that flows into the Rio Orinoco. So we got into the Rio Orinoco river system, which, by the way, here I'm overlapping to the other trip because I had been here. So for this little stretch here, I had been there before. And but we went upstream in this case, going sailing up the Orinoco. And so now, the other time I was going with the current, but against the wind. Now I'm going with the wind, but against the current. And so we sailed up it, and then this is the Llanos, but it transitions into the Amazon. So slowly it's getting more rainfall and more lush vegetation. And we decided to see if we could get over this divide. There's a geographical oddity here called the Brazo Casiquiare, and that's the name of a river or a tributary of a stream, tributary of the Negro. The Negro is a tributary. This is the Negro. The Negro is a tributary of the Amazon. Well, the Casiquiare is a tributary of the Negro. And the oddity occurs right here, and that's that the Orinoco River begins here in these mountains called the Guyana Massif, and it flows out, and at this point it bisects it. Some of it goes this way as the Orinoco, and some of it goes this way as the Casiquiare. So to my knowledge, it's the only place in the world where you can navigate up one river and then take a distributary and go to a completely different river system. So that's how we go through here. The Casiquiare is extremely remote. For a week, we saw no people. There's the Llano. When we did see people, they were Yanomami, which is one of the better known Indian tribes. They're famously warlike, but not anymore. And very, very wild and jungly. Then it flows into the Negro, and that had been in Venezuela. Now we're well, we got Colombia to one side, and then we're entirely in Brazil. Going down, we hit a town called São Gabriel de Cachoeira, which means a waterfall, and there's a waterfall there. But we made it through. Well, it's like rapids. We were able to navigate through it. And the Negro is probably our favorite part of everything, right, Jane?
Yeah.
You want to say anything about the real Negro?
Well, yeah, it has no mosquitoes.
No mosquitoes, because
It's yellow acid.
tannic acid,
Yeah.
which is like
Almost no people are.
almost no people, that's pure woods, yeah. And it's really big. The river is so big, and we were there at the high time. It's high, and these rivers, they're 40 feet higher during the rainy season than in the dry season. And so, and it's flat country, so the whole country is water, you never see land, you're just going through through this river that could be 40 miles wide. You could see the two, but there's forests that are partly exposed, and you sail through forests. You never know what's underneath you. There might be the actual riverbed there. It might be more forests that are totally inundated. It might be farms. You don't know. You tie up to a tree at night. And some of the strange things that happen there are that we had bees constantly landing on our rigging. Well, in the morning they would be landing, trying to make a nest in our rigging because they need a place to, make a hive, I guess. So we had to scare them off. And ants, the ants get treed by the rise of the water, and so the trees are just covered with ants. And so as you tie a tree, the ants all come onto your boat. So we had to make sure that the line was for at least part of the way submerged. They can't crawl underwater. And all kind of hitchhikers, rodents, spiders, frogs, strange insects that you don't have here. So I don't know what to call them. Snakes, and no snakes ever came. And so anyway, that's the Rio Negro. It's tannic acid. It's a kind of a dark coloring. The water is totally clean and clear in a way. It has no sediment, but it has this tannic acid coloring very intensely. So if you take a glass of it and hold it up to a light, it's not particularly dark, but that's because you only got a little bit of it. If you go like this much, well, then it's sort of a cumulative effect of that tannic acid, and it becomes opaque. So looking into it's just black. Water cannot penetrate. I mean, light cannot penetrate. Anyway, it changes totally when the Negro enters the Amazon. Amazon's not like that at all. It's cloudy. It's full of sediment. And so we went down the main stem of the Amazon, the relatively short distance, and we met this guy on the upper Orinoco who told us about a dream that he had to go over this divide here by boat, but he had never done it, but got our wheels turning that maybe we can do that. And so we studied routes. We would go to an internet cafe, look at Google Earth, and zoom in, zoom out. Jenny was good at that sort of thing. She was able, with her, we were able to zoom in or out with Google Earth and use art programs that are sort of integrated with Google Earth to make our own maps. So we're looking at where we're going to be, we're zoomed in appropriately, and we're clicking to do the shorelines and the islands. And we build this as a map. So we started doing that as soon as we got into the Orinoco. And then those maps became something that would be on our GPS. Our navigation is just on a handheld GPS. It's in your hand like this. And we attach that to our mizzen mast, which is in front of us when we're steering. It's right here, so we can see the little map. And we can pan and zoom on our little map to show us where the shorelines are. And it was very helpful. When we got to so this is called the Madeira, another big river. The Madeira is also so big that you can't see from one shore to the other. There's sea horizons, means you can't see land on the other side. And going up it now, we're going upstream. And when we got to You know, that the motor broke down, we had to get a different motor. We got to a place called Puerto Velho, and there's a series of rapids there, so we got a portage. These little P's stand for P. P is portage, and got to this other town, and we continued. And the river going from so big, it became smaller and smaller and smaller until we can barely navigate through it. It's just a creek, you know. And we got to the head of navigation and arranged a portage from the Vela de Trinidad to Pittsburgh. That's it. And we're going downstream again now, and immediately we find ourselves in Mato Grosso Pantanal. That's the world's biggest swamp. It's the size of the state of Washington. It's hundreds of 250 miles, 300 miles to get through it. That was about a week. It's total swamp. There's no habitation. There's no population whatsoever. And the navigational part was very, very interesting because a river flowing through a swamp is hard to see even on Google Earth. Yeah, it's hard to make it out. But we managed. We got through the Pantanal. By the way, I've never heard of anybody else doing these things. You know, that for example, we sailed through Bolivia. People don't sail through Bolivia. That's thought to be a landlocked country, right? Well, we had Bolivia on our right bank for hundreds of miles, and through the Mato Grosso, and now going down the Rio Paraguay, through the country of Paraguay, and through Argentina, and eventually come out the mouth of the Paraguay flows into the Paraná. The Paraná is, I guess, slightly bigger than the Paraguay, so the name of the combined river is Paraná, and that has its mouth here. And then this is a map that's a little more zoomed in. This is where the Paraná flows into the Atlantic Ocean, but there's another geographical oddity here. It's called the Rio de la Plata. It's called a river, even though it looks like a big bay. It's to vision, it looks like just the ocean, but it's called a river because it is actually fresh water. There's so much fluent of water coming in that it's all fresh here. That question was, did we stop at Iguazu Falls? And I will tell you about that in a minute. We saw rays. Now the rays, actually the rays are, we didn't see big ones. I don't know. I wasn't aware that there are big ones. I'm not surprised. Well, but the rays, the freshwater stingrays are actually probably the most dangerous animal life there because they are very painful, if not fatal, perhaps, if you get stung by them. And we almost got hit by that, but did not actually. So that actually is a dangerous thing. Okay, so we got this far. We went to Montevideo, and that is an end point of going south because there's no further river systems. We decided to go back by way of the Rio Uruguay. So we went up the Rio Uruguay, and we got that's the country of Uruguay, Argentina on the left bank, and then Brazil on one side and Argentina on the other. And from this town here, we make arrangements to transport to the Paraná. So we've been on Paraná in part, but now we're on an upper part of the Paraná. And Jenny was pregnant by this time. We knew that sometime in Argentina, and we had been stopping at clinics and so forth. And we could have had the baby anywhere. We had offers, really. You can have it here free of charge, and encouraging us to stay. But Jenny preferred to have it be born in Brazil. Him. And we had a book. We still have it. It's called Where There Is No Doctor. And the book tells you how to have your baby, you know, without help. And so we had that ready in case it came early. Wow. But it didn't come early, and so George was born in the hospital. Yeah, you know, Foz do Iguaçu.
Foz do Iguaçu means at the mouth of the Iguaçu River, but that's most famous for the waterfall. So that's when we're in Iguaçu. And that's George's middle name, because he was born in Iguaçu, George Iguaçu there. And Lois came down and we got a apartment for 1 month, 2 weeks prior to the birth and 2 weeks after the birth. And then we continued. Everybody else went home and we continued from Foz do Iguaçu. The three of us now, motoring upstream. This is a region of, it's a big river, very large, but it has dams on it with reservoirs. So it's kind of like the Missouri, right? And you have to get around each of the dams. Sometimes there are locks that will let you through, sometimes they're not, and you have to get a ride. And when we got to Morelandia, here again, the rivers got really small until we could barely navigate anymore. And we got a ride to another river going north. That's the real Hawaii. This is a very long river, and that took several months. We came down it, and in Belém, the remaining part of the trip would be in the ocean, which is not suitable for wife and baby. So they flew home, and I continued alone, just trying to get back home. And so now the final part. Any questions on that? Because I'm going to go to a different part of the voyage. Okay. Now I came out the mouth of the Amazon, and they were home, but well, George, he traveled with us for about 3 or 4 months, 3 months maybe. And then we had to go back to the United States, because in Brazil with a tourist visa, you can only be there for 6 months. Then you have to be gone for 6 months. So we came back to the US, and then we came back to where our boat was. And George had his first birthday down there in Brazil. And then George traveled with us for about 3 months. And so he was 1.5 or something like that when he and Ginny flew back home. And then for 5 months, I tried to get back home myself. The navigational challenges here, it's extremely high. High tidal range again, and the coast is very flat. Therefore, the location of the shoreline varies miles and low tide to high tide, and it's just mangrove. You can't really go ashore there. It's just jungle. And then it changes, of course, with the Antilles. And here again, I'm repeating where I had been in the 3-year voyage. And I did fine until I got to here. And what essentially happened is that, as usual, I am using Google Earth to, I'd gotten in the habit of just making all my own maps. I didn't even carry a conventional chart anymore. I just made my own charts. But then you have to look at these charts very carefully. Not the charts, you have to look at Google Earth very carefully to determine whether you think you can enter someplace. With a very small boat, you have to get out of the water to rest. You can keep going overnight, but it's very tiring. You don't want to do that. You know, there are times when for 3, 4, 5 nights in a row, there's no place to go ashore or into a harbor. But that's to be avoided. And so in this case, the question was, where, leaving Puerto Rico, could I find refuge in the Dominican Republic, which here it is here. And so I was looking at the image from the satellite, and you're looking at indications of surf. Surf is visible as white, and then you can maybe see that there's a reef and an opening in a reef, and inside that reef you might see that there are other boats. So there's a place, that's got some shelter. And so it looked like there was shelter there inside a reef that had an opening to it. And so I sailed from this little island to there. It's called Punta Cana. And I got there. It was a time of high swell, like 10 feet. It's a high swell. higher than about the height of this room here. And high swell means high surf, you know. It's not necessarily super windy, it's just moderately windy, but it's really bad surf whenever that hits something. And so I got to that place where I figured I could enter, and I kind of lingered a little bit, looked okay. And so I proceeded, but then when I got to the critical moment, which is where the pass, you know, we have to get over the hump of the coral reef, a big wave, a wave the height of the room here came that was breaking, curling, and pitch poled me, somersaulted me, and I was underwater, and I came to the surface, and my boat had already bounced back up and come upright, but both its masts were broken and the sails were in tatters, and I had lost my rowing equipment, and my motor had been underwater, and but I found myself in a little enclave of civilization. I didn't know what was going to be there. It turns out what's there is 10 miles of tourist hotels. It's a popular tourist place, and people had seen me capsize, and a boat came out. Actually, it was a Dominican Republic naval outboard, and I was under arrest again for a day and a half, just for them to decide what to do. It was not a port of entry, so I was a little bit of trouble there. And but I sold the boat for $700 to this guy, and because I could have figured something out. I could have gotten a couple of trees or something, and some bed sheets or something, you know. But I'd been 5 months separate from my family, so it's public place. So I flew to SeaTac, and that's now George there is whatever, 2 years old almost. So that's us getting back together. Right, that's the end of that trip. I think it's January 2015.
The question was when the last picture was taken. Was there another question? Have you finished building your new boat yet?
No, it's not done yet. Yeah, I'm building a new boat.
Other questions? So now I have one though. I think that when you were going through Colombia and Venezuela and that place where there were all the murderers and the drug trade, and they stole the other person's boat motor and murdered him, but maybe they didn't even want your little teeny weeny boat.
Right. Yeah, that's very much true. I probably would not have survived if I had something that looked good.
Yeah. This was wonderful, Stephen. Stephen Ladd, I think this is one of our loveliest and most adventuresome talks that we've had, and thank you very much. But now, really, there should be more questions. Now,
We forgot, in the book, what I enjoyed reading about were the relationships with people. What I enjoyed was talking about all the people that you met along the way, and how many of them were so kind to you and opened up their workshops so that you could work on your damaged boat and repair things, and they had all kinds of skills. Do you have a favorite story or interaction that you want to talk about?
That would be a good question to ask Jenny. Does anything come to mind there for you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the man who gave us the idea to keep going to Buenos Aires was very memorable. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have never made it, you know, past the rapids on the Rio Orinoco, because the government was pretty harsh on us. They didn't really like us being there, and there were a lot of bureaucratic requirements to get through there, and this man was able to kind of help us figure it out, you know, and he gave us that idea too.
Yeah.
So that was
His name?
Yeah.
Virgilio.
Virgilio Limpas.
Yes, he was in the town of Puerto
Puerto
Ayacucho, in the upper Orinoco, and yes, that region that we had to go through, that part of Venezuela is an indigenous only area, and it's hard to be allowed to go through it.
I want to say also that all the books are available. I'll get you a all the books are available at the library, so you don't have to buy them.
Right.
You could buy them, but the library does have very many copies, several.
Now, you're going back as a family to Brazil for a month in October.
Right.
How many of the people that you met along the way are you planning to visit?
Well, we're gonna go back.
I'm going to just repeat that,
Sure.
how many people are you going to go back to visit of the ones that you met during your trip?
Well, Brazil is so big that we just can't drive all over and visit all the people. So we're just gonna focus on. We might see, yeah, we're gonna get together with some people we knew when we're in the Sao Paulo area. And then we're gonna go to Foz do Iguaçu and meet some of our friends there.
There was a question about why Jenny, Steve's wife, picked Brazil to have their baby in.
Well, it was my favorite. We had been there.
Why don't you go over here? That way
Okay.
you're both in the.
Brazil was my favorite of the countries that we traveled in. And it was possible for him to be born there. So for me, it was like, I could give him this gift where he's Brazilian. He can go back whenever he wants and he, you know. So if I was gonna have him anyway,
And he's
somewhere,
He's got. dual
Why not?
Citizenship.
Yes.
too.
yes, it does. But yeah, Brazil was really special to me. And it was like, we spent a lot of time in Spanish speaking countries, but because I'm kind of shy, I don't speak it very well. And we tended to be around people who also were more reserved, so I didn't get very much practice. And then when we entered Brazil, it was like the people were just always coming up and speaking with us. And it forced me to practice more and I got better at it. And so I think because of that, I felt more comfortable in Brazil too. But, also it's just the vast like wilderness that. Mhm. Yeah, so I didn't know any Portuguese when we entered. But I ended up getting better at it than I did Spanish, even though we spent more time in Spanish.
You have a question? Question is whether we have any regrets. Well, of course, I regret losing the boat. I regret making that attempt to enter there. I should have done something different there. Either continue or just wait longer. And what you should do in that situation, and I kind of knew it, but I just had a moment of laxity, which is that you have to linger longer. You have to stay there and get kind of close to the braking zone and very carefully watch, because sometimes there's the waves are not so big for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they're big again. So if you waited 5 or 10 minutes, you would see, oh, it is worse than I thought. And I didn't wait that period of time.
Thank you very much, Steve.